change in our country in the next 4 years. There will be significant change in our country in the next 4 years.
Across the board, in our first panel.
Across the board.
Anybody here undecided? Anybody here undecided? Anybody here undecided?
Anybody make a last-minute decision? Anybody make a last-minute decision?
That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me. But I also have to ask this. Last show of hands. Any first presidential election. In this presidential election.
Love you, Matt.
Rick,
love you, Matt.
You live in Thornton.
You're
70 years old. Rick, you live 70 years old. You're 70 years old. You're registered to vote. First off, thank you for your service. First off, thank you for your service on registering for your service. Second, congratulations on registering.
Why now? I've been told that I have no right to explain. I've been told that I register and vote. I register and vote. I register and vote. Second reason, it's on my bucket. Second reason, it's on my bucket. Second reason, it's on my bucket.
I hope you have many more elections. I hope you have many more. I hope you have many more elections. What was your first experience with American democracy? What was your first experience with American democracy?
It was a lot smoother than I thought it would be. It was a lot smoother than I thought it would be. It took me longer to make up my mind why I wanted what I wanted. It was easy enough to listen to. It was easy enough to listen to. My choice. I feel like I made a good choice. I'm very hopeful though that's true.
You voted for President-elect. You voted for President-elect for the future. And I know that the future. I know that it's not. And I know universally. Not shared universally here. I know universally. You had concerns about what the next. You had concerns about what the next 4 years are going to look like.
So LGBT for me, so the most anti-LGBT platform ran to get into office. I'm very fearful what policies and legislation might come down from that, as well as we're going to treat that, as well as there's already been a lot of reported crimes, a lot of reported hate crimes.
What are your practical fears? What are your practical fears for the future?
That people I love and people I know get treated fairly. Someone else. I mean, just someone else. I mean, like everybody else. I mean, I'm like everybody else in this room. Like everybody else in this room. Love people in return. Be loved and love people in return. And love people in return.
Chad, you voted for. How would you like to see America in Colorado? How would you like to see America treat Hannah and her friends and treat Hannah and her friends
with respect? I mean, just definitely with respect. I mean, definitely we were just talking. I mean, just talking really about Facebook has really been, and we've been able to talk to each other, and we've been able to talk to each other. We've been able to really screen lost the human dynamic of us being able to human dynamic of us. We have human dynamic totally we have in person. Totally opposite views, but totally opposite views. But I would with respect. With respect. With respect. My only reserve is that Colorado, how we should Colorado, how we should the citizens of Colorado, the citizens of Colorado.
I want to ask you another quick question before we step away. And this before we step away and this is start the second part of our discussion. Who here has lost a friend over politics in the last year? Anybody feeling strained with family? Anybody strained with as a result of politics over the last? As a result of politics over the last? As a result of politics. We're going to get into that when we return. We're going to get into that when we return. We're going to get into that when we return. Next.
Thank you, Colorado. This year's Thank you, Colorado. Thank you, Colorado.
Together we collected tons of food. Together we collected tons of food. Special thanks to all 9 special thanks to all 9 special thanks to all 9 donors. You still have time. You still have time to donate.
You can send donation box at any super, you can drop off any new Colorado at any youth Colorado at any.
Let's keep the spirit of giving going. Let's keep the spirit of giving going. All month long.
At camp, we believe all children should have like the power to feel safe, like the power to safe, like the power to feel safe, and protect the power. Thousands of children are victims of child abuse. Thousands of child abuse. You can help by child abuse. You can help by supporting. You can help by supporting camp child abuse children, camp professionals, camp entrance professionals to ensure a healthy and soulful future for these innocent, to ensure a healthy and wholesome future for these innocent. Learn more and give a child the power, and give a child the power, and give a a complete range of affordable health screenings, including youth find a fair and take charge of your health.
Hello again. Who thought next was going to be canceled by now? Next was going to be canceled by now. Next was going to be canceled by now. We set out to do a 30-minute non-stop conversation. It's non-stop conversation. Non-stop conversation. Nothing is off limits. If you see something that's funny enough, if you see something that's funny enough, if you see something that's funny enough, send it to your friend. Send it to your friend. Include us on the conversation. Include us on the conversation. Include us on the conversation. And then we can include everybody else. And then we can include everybody else around. Still on the air. That's next. Still on the air.
To keep you and your family safe. It's important to keep your house safe by closing your house safe by closing your house safe by main door window. Keep your valuables in your car. Keep your valuables in your car. Keep your valuables in your car. Choose a well-traveled route. Choose a well-traveled route. Choose a well-traveled route. And be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of your surroundings. It's that easy to be safe. It's that easy to be safe. It's that it's up to you. And for your safety, and for your safety, and for your safety, the Denver Police Department to protect and serve you. The Denver Police
where we have gathered Coloradans with different political opinions, to talk about the election, to talk about the election, to talk about the election and what they see in the coming 4 years. During the break, Hannah from Denver, you were talking about Hannah from Denver, you were talking. This isn't just about you were talking about. This isn't just about policy. This isn't just this is about policies as an LGBT American, as an LGBT American, as an LGBT American rights, and about your rights. You voted for Trump. You voted for Donald Trump. You gave her hugs to your beautiful person. I'm sorry that you feel this way. Do you also look at the situation? Do you also look at the situation? Do you also look at the situation? She wouldn't be the person that I voted for. The person that I voted for. If the person that I voted for hadn't won.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm like.
We all know what the definition of bigot is. It kind of defeats the purpose of you calling me that. So it's caused problems at work.
How have you overcome that?
I actually pulled the people aside and explained to them that my opinions matter as much as theirs do. What they believe politically has nothing to do with me. I adore them as friends, and that's how I want it to stay. Mm-hmm. We can agree to disagree and not discuss politics anymore.
Real quickly before we go to break, Gordon, I know that your goal is to make America kind again. We seem to have a consensus on kindness. Take us to break with your thoughts on that.
Well, it comes to finding common ground. I think if anything I learned in this election about, as American people, we are a kind-hearted people, loving for others. And it means immigration, it means all of the things that our American standards have held for years and years and years, and our veterans have fought for. Let's find that as our common ground and move together. Doesn't matter what our economic policies are. We can probably make many of the tactics work, but as a people, let's agree to be kind to each other.
Gordon, thank you. I had a list of all these questions that I thought were really smart, and then a next viewer sent me the absolute best question of all, and I want to ask you guys that next.
Heaven Cares Colorado shares box at King Soopers all this month. Your $5 or $10 donations provide food for fellow Coloradans in need. Donate one today.
She's wanted a wedding like this her whole life.
The journey to the celebration of life.
Look how big it is.
For Kayla and Jaron.
I'm getting married.
Started.
Hold on. Don't do it yet, because she's over there.
With a fight against death.
They met because they were both cancer patients.
I was going out for my done with chemo party, and she was there for, I think it was her brother's birthday.
They fell in love and actually got married in court. They even have 3 kids, but they never had a wedding.
We've always wanted to have a wedding like this. It just wasn't the right time with me being in treatment again.
My wife still has a brain tumor that she's actively fighting.
Kayla, do you take this man to be your husband?
I do.
They can finally have their wedding day.
For the first time in years, I feel beautiful and feminine, and I'm not just a sick person, I'm a princess today.
You made me cry.
A reception that's been long overdue.
I'm T.D. Jakes, and I'm here to empower you in 30 seconds. You know it's not too late to choose happiness. After all, it's something you get to decide. Being happy doesn't mean everything is perfect. Choosing happiness means you are looking beyond the imperfections and still saying yes to the best life has to offer. Give yourself permission to experience the joy and excitement of life by choosing happiness every chance you get.
Join the magic of the 9 News Parade of Lights. Support a great cause and enjoy a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Visit our special auction at denverparadeoflights.com and bid on amazing experiences. Ride in the parade with Santa. Get a sneak peek behind the scenes. Spend a night in luxury and so much more. Proceeds benefit the Downtown Denver Events nonprofit organization helping to preserve this Colorado tradition. Visit denverparadeoflights.com to get started. We'll see you at the 9 News Parade of Lights December 2nd and 3rd.
There are heroes among us. They don't fly or bend steel or ride off into the sunset. They simply volunteer to look after someone else's health by providing comfort, lending a hand, or simply keeping us on track. Everyone's health needs a hero. Who will you look out for?
Find out how you can participate in improving our health. Visit iparticipate.org.
Where we have gathered Coloradans from across the political spectrum to have what has been a really interesting, productive conversation about what you agree about and what you disagree about here, and we're coming up on the 30-minute mark in our conversation, where we're going to shift over onto 9news.com, where the conversation will be streaming. Facebook Live is where you can add your own comments and questions, and we're discussing a lot of those on the Facebook feed and on the 9 News and the 9 News app feed. So the question that was posed to me via email from an ex-viewer that I thought was really striking is they wanted me to ask the Clinton supporters and then the Trump supporters, is there something that Donald Trump could do in the next 4 years to win your support or to lose your support? So, David, you voted for Secretary Clinton. You're a registered Democrat. Can you conceive of anything that Donald Trump could do in 4 years that would earn your support?
Probably maintaining our attitude toward our international partners, important things like not cozying up to Russia, and instead being, and we're going to be entering a new Cold War, so it's something that we need to be aware of, and not getting on board with Russia.
So you're saying there's no chance?
Yes, there is no chance. That is the unfortunate bit.
You haven't heard him say anything that you say that I can get on board with?
Yes, actually. One of the things you mentioned was about NATO and other countries not paying their way. I think it's important for us as the central player in NATO to always respond. If one of us is attacked, all of us are. That's true. But he is right that other nations are not paying their percentage. We pay our full percentage plus the operating costs of NATO, and the other nations aren't even paying their percentage.
Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump, was asked on 60 Minutes about some of the hate crimes that have been seen across the country, and he turned to the camera and told his supporters, stop it. I know that you're particularly concerned about how we treat our Muslim neighbors. What would you like to see him do in that regard? There's a lot of heated campaign rhetoric. There are a lot of things said. What would you like to see from him?
I would say not take action on things like registering Muslims, and take an active role in ensuring that this kind of hate crimes and things don't continue. I think the important thing one of the others commented was about the true heart of America, the friendliness, the acceptance, the tolerance. That is actually what I hope is that will come out during this presidency. And I hope that Trump could foster that. But even if he doesn't, I think our nation is strong enough and good enough that we could do that.
Tay, you're an unaffiliated voter who voted for Secretary Clinton. Is there something that President-elect Trump could do in the next 4 years to win your vote?
Well, I'll start appointing some people that draining the swamp is what he kind of ran on, and it seems like he's electing swamp dwellers, I would say, to be kind about it.
Against him, he could still deliver on that for you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but when you talk about somebody on paper who would run for president, and Donald Trump is obviously a great choice. However, the rhetoric, and absolutely he said things to people to identify with them to get them to vote for him. You know, I don't think that America is as divisive and angry against each other as it's been portrayed in this election. I think it's a news cycle that it gets people to watch and it gets people to have an opinion, but I totally agree with you. We're a friendly nation. We're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation that pulls ourselves up by our bootstraps. We help our neighbors, and that's kind of all gone away by and it's not a forefront anymore.
Rob, real quickly, if there's something that a President Trump could do to earn your respect and your vote.
Yeah, so I think as Tay mentioned, there was, there was a lot of reach to kind of some of the fringe, voters out there. And a lot of that reach was this rhetoric, things that were said, things that were, very anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant. And I think he really needs to address that. There are a lot of protests that are happening right now, and I think they're valid reasons. There's a lot of stuff that's going on out there that's saying this is just sore losers. I really don't think that's the case. I think this is America's reaction to when you use some of these tactics. And I'm an MBA. I get it in business. It's really whatever it takes to get to that point. He's used that strategy, and I think he needs to address that. I think he needs to specifically say, I don't stand for these things. These things are wrong.
Rob, thank you so much. Our conversation continues. Let's just talk. Our next town hall, an hour-long special, continues at 6:30. We begin streaming on 9news.com and on the 9 News app. Hope you'll stay with us.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
I'm Marta Coniglio, sharing Colorado's weather stories. 9 News, everywhere.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow, they'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful
This is why you get by on 4 hours sleep. Why you took a second job. This is why you taught yourself how to fix the plumbing. And spend hours juggling the bills. This is why you'll do whatever it takes to keep your home. And that
is why we want to help. We are making home affordable, a free government resource that can make paying the mortgage easier. Now more options are available. Call 888-995-HOPE to talk one-on-one with a housing expert today.
Coloradans with differing political views, but a shared belief that we ought to be talking with each other about our hopes and our fears for America. And our conversation is going to continue at 6:30, streaming on 9news.com and on the 9 News app. And we're about to hear from a bunch more 9 News viewers, next viewers who have come in to have this conversation. But quickly before we go, I hear a lot of common ground despite ideological differences. And I'm curious, for everybody who did not vote for Donald Trump, show of hands if you're willing to give him a chance to govern and govern well. And for everybody who voted for Donald Trump, do you understand the fears that we've heard on this stage, and you'll fight to counteract them?
Absolutely.
All right, that's it for this portion. We'll continue on 9news.com next with a bunch more Colorado voters who want to talk.
I mean, you can see pictures of the canyon and think, oh, that's really a beautiful canyon. But until you walk to the edge, you can't be prepared for this place.
When that view makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, just know each hair is 1 year's worth of work for the mighty river below.
2,000-foot canyon formed over about 2 million years.
Time will tell.
That's a human hair a year.
And this is a long story.
Brilliant.
Unbelievable. I've never seen a canyon
anything like
this.
A hair's width of erosion each year, a hair deeper, a hair darker. That's how Black Canyon was born.
It's kind of hard to believe. It's a really small river down there.
This is the tamed Gunnison, dammed and diverted by man for man, turned into a trickle of its former self. Even still,
most of the time going through the canyon would have been impossible.
Rangers like Nick Myers will warn.
Rafting's impossible. Most of the rapids are unnavigable. We get a few kayakers a year that give it a go when the water levels are right, but the currents and the undertow is just really amazing.
So this is as close as most will ever get to the depths of Black Canyon.
And people for thousands of years have been analyzing risk here. There's no evidence at all of humans at the bottom of the canyon before around 1900. So people were here before then, for sure. There's lots of evidence on the rim, but they were looking down in the canyon thinking, no way.
No way, for most. We asked, which way?
It's not a maintained trail. We don't have any signage. We don't have any markers. Some folks might not know what they're really getting into right away as far as the wilderness route goes.
Welcome back to Let's Just Talk, our hour-long next special in which we are moving from our one-on-one conversations that we've been having since the election to a town hall-style format where we gather Coloradans from across the political spectrum with all kinds of different beliefs and sit down for a civil conversation, because everybody who is here, while you disagreed on the presidential election, you agreed on the fact that we ought to be talking to each other at this point. And want to reintroduce everybody here because we've got a new group of voters with a wide variety of beliefs. Again, who voted in the presidential election? Hands up. That's the last thing I raise my hand for. You don't get to know the rest. And then real quickly, Democrats, hands. Republicans, hands. Unaffiliated or third party, hands. And right in the back row there, we have Jeremy, who voted for Libertarian Gary Johnson, and Matt, who's returning from our first segment because I totally passed him up and didn't give him a chance to talk. And then in the center is Chris, correct, who voted for Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. And we should note that third-party candidates are wildly overrepresented on this panel because they got 6% of the vote in Colorado, but we love you guys too, and we want your views to be included right here. Let me ask you this. Who would consider themselves hopeful for the next 4 years? A good portion of you, including all of the third-party voters, who would consider themselves fearful for the next 4 years? Okay, hope and fear from Jeremy, and then the folks who voted for Secretary Clinton more fearful about what's coming our way. So you decided at the end of the day, Jeremy, that you couldn't vote for either of the major party candidates despite the fact that you live in a highly competitive state.
Correct. 2012, I voted for Gary Johnson as well after Dr. Ron Paul fell out of the Republican race because
Gary Johnson most closely identified with Ron Paul's ideals. And I think the status quo, the duopoly of the two-party system is really tearing us apart, and I feel that what we're presented with after the primaries with both parties is people that are out of touch with common people. They're millionaires.
Can I ask you, as somebody whose political philosophy spans the two parties and might span some of the conversation, where do these people agree and they don't know that they agree?
I think, as seen in the first segment, I think that we're all kind of humanitarian. I don't think we care in general what happens in someone else's bedroom. Women's rights, I mean, you know, religious beliefs aside, I think a lot of people, when they're put in a position, think that women have a right to freedom of choice. It's their body.
I know you were sending a message by voting for Gary Johnson. Nick, you were sending a message too by voting for Donald Trump. And you were trying to send a message against career politicians. How does he need to govern in order to maintain your trust? Because if you're voting against career politicians, I can imagine you could just as easily bounce him in 4 years.
Right. Well, 2008, I actually voted for Obama, and he kind of had the same goal against career politicians. But I think with a full Republican Washington, I think he's not going to follow as much of career politics like everybody else would. And to what the previous group was saying on that side, such as like building a wall and stuff like that, I really don't foresee, and I hope that I don't see, an actual physical wall. I mean, it could be a monetary, you know, or a check, but he's going to be under a lot of scrutiny.
If he follows through on some of his more extreme promises, like the idea of registering Muslims entering this country, building a wall, will you regret your vote?
I don't know that I would regret it, but I think it'd bring me closer to people who didn't vote for him.
Arlene, you have experience as an immigrant, and you voted for a candidate who said some pretty pejorative things about immigrants, albeit not ones that look like you and me.
That's right.
And most of the people here. We should note we did not screen for demographics. We just asked people who wanted to participate. So we're mighty white around here. But let me ask you, what about Trump's immigration message resonated with you, and what do you hope that people who disagreed with you on your ultimate choice understand?
I should have paid maybe more attention to exactly what his policies were, but I fought to live in this country. It's a big, big deal for me to live here. And I just really, really believe that we can all come together and make this country a better place. And I raised my son with that when we were privileged enough to come here, that this is a gift. This is a privilege. And don't do anything to abuse this. And I was asked to speak in a 5th grade class where they teach immigration in 5th grade, and got this shock of my life when I looked around and I saw what was a great big room full of people that looked very different than I do. And I just encourage them to wake up every morning and be thankful for where they live and to contribute in some way. And kindness. It's just exactly what the other gentleman was saying before.
I hear so many of you describing the best of America, and yet I think so many people's fears are rooted in the worst they see. Samantha, you voted for Secretary Clinton. What would you love to see your new Republican friends, because we're all friends, we all met for 5 minutes earlier and we had snacks. What would you like to see them link arms with you on over the next 4-8 years to preserve?
I think it's really important that Donald Trump is one man, President-elect Trump is one man, and if he starts, like, registering Muslims, I'm going to sign up, I will register, even though I'm not Muslim. I don't feel like that's the course of action that we should take, and I would hope that Democrats and Republicans, if there are some really extreme policies that do not benefit us as people and humans, we stand together in standing up and saying this isn't right and we should not do this.
One question that we talked about in our last half hour, which was a question that came in from a next viewer, and I thought was really insightful. The next viewer wanted to know from each side, is there something that Donald Trump could do to lose the support of his voters or gain the support of Clinton voters? And Craig, I'll ask you, is there something that Donald Trump could do in the next 4 years at which point you would walk away from him?
Yeah, there's a lot of things he could probably do. It's like just being completely narrow-minded and with window blinders on and going one direction. I'll probably lose faith a little bit in him. Things that I do like about him were very concrete. For example, pulling out of Syria was a big concern of mine, where I knew Hillary was very pushing aggressively within Syria. And if he flips on a lot of things of that nature, on foreign policy, if he kind of lets China slide, which he's been attacking very aggressively, I'll probably start backing away from those issues.
So this will be the one and only time in the hour special in which I will interject my opinion. But my guess is that the people who voted for Hillary Clinton are going to be horrified by what they see in the next 4 years, and that the people who voted for Donald Trump are going to be very disappointed in the limited amount of change that he's actually going to be able to bring. That's just my best guess as somebody who's covered politics for about a decade. Michael, I'm curious what you've thought as somebody who has been listening into this conversation for 45 minutes or so. What have you heard so far and you thought, that's it, that's what more people need to hear?
That we're not the extremes that seem to be brought out in the media. The extremes on either side, whether it's the extremes on the Democratic side or the Republican side. Like they said before, we're not all deplorable, we're not all uneducated, and there's not a large percentage on the Democratic side that are closed-minded and not willing to listen. Now, there are extremes that always exist on both sides, but they're a small percentage. But that's the thing that's most sensationalized, so that seems to be what gets the coverage. And so a lot of this kind of stuff doesn't. And that's kind of sad. Because the country survived for 240 some odd years. We'll survive this, whether it be 4 or 8 years. We'll get through.
Anybody doubt that?
I hope we do. I really do. But Steve Bannon's appointment as chief strategist makes me super concerned and very afraid.
Mm-hmm. You know, Lee wanted to talk about that specifically. It wasn't just Donald Trump, but it was the people surrounding him. But let's look forward in a spirit of unity. What would be an encouraging sign on that aspect for you?
You know, he has a chance to start with people by standing up against the hate crimes that are going on, addressing the nation that way, and bringing more people into his cabinet that are middle of the road. And
do they need to be Democrats or just more middle of the road Republicans?
Yes.
Okay. And what would that signal to you?
That he's trying, that he's not going to do everything that he said that he was going to do. Those are the things that he could do that would make me feel hopeful.
Mm-hmm. So it's just a fact that if Democrats had come out for Hillary Clinton, that she would be president. And if she had been able to ignite the fire that Bernie Sanders lit, that she would probably be president. Chris, I want to hear from you. You voted for Dr. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. Would you have voted for Bernie Sanders?
Absolutely.
You would have voted for Bernie Sanders. Okay. As you look forward, what is your greatest concern, and what is the area that you look to with hopefulness?
Yeah, my greatest concern is people dividing throughout our country. I believe that, you know, regardless of one's views about Donald Trump, that they should unite together and have a conversation like this show is. And I believe that every voice should be heard, and every side should be accounted for.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, let me ask you, you voted for Libertarian Gary Johnson, and it was not media bias that caused me to ignore you in the first panel. I brought you back here, but we're part of this conversation as well. There's Democrats and Republicans and unaffiliated voters and Libertarians and Greens and journalists. What do you need out of the media going forward
I think less spin, and I think this is a good platform that is kind of providing color from every spectrum, whether it's Republican, whether it's Democrat, whether it's Green Party, whether it's Libertarian, Independent, doesn't matter. I think giving people a platform to speak. And another thing that I think would be really cool is, let's say, hey, we're watching CNN or watching Fox News or whatever the outlet is. Before someone's speaking, I'd like to know where they stand. Are they a libertarian? Are they an independent? Are they a Republican? Are they a Democrat? Because then I could look through a certain lens and understand, okay, well, is this leaning a little bit left? Is this leaning a little bit right? Help me to understand that. And I don't think that's something that we've gotten out of the media. Another thing that's really bothered me is Democrats have been running a smear campaign on Donald Trump, and Republicans have been running a smear campaign on Hillary Clinton. And what's happened is the issues have kind of been overlooked. One of the things that I really wanted to bring up today, it just kind of dawned on me, is the debt. And I think that's something that everyone can agree on is a huge, huge issue. You can't make America great again if you're in the red. There needs to be a way to remedy that. And
do you think Donald Trump's the person that's going to do that?
I think from a business standpoint and from a free market standpoint, maybe. What I think Donald Trump needs to stay away from are social issues. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a registered libertarian, right? And so what that means is smaller federal government, less intervening in business, and keep the government out of your bedroom, right? People should have the freedom to make decisions, any decision that they want to make, so long as they're not hurting someone.
Can I ask you, there are so many head nods for you, and there were head nods for those comments in the first panel. And why don't head nods translate to votes? Because Gary Johnson got 5% in Colorado. This was supposed to be his year. It was supposed to be his year nationally. And why is it that a libertarian-leaning state like Colorado doesn't vote that way?
So there's a thing called Citizens United, which basically allocates funding to either Democrats or Republicans and basically gives special interests the puppet strings to decide who they want their representatives to be. I think another thing that needs to be looked at is the Commission on Presidential Debates. That's run by Democrats and Republicans. There is no third-party representation there. You also have to get to 15% just to be in the debates.
Is that unreasonable? You'd like to see that lower?
I'd like to see it abolished. I don't think
we had I think 22 presidential candidates on the ballot in Colorado. On Next, we did equal time for all 22, and I lost my breath, and we had some issues. No, but there probably is a middle ground. I want to make sure that we hear from Dean, because we haven't heard from Dean yet. What are we missing in this conversation? We've talked about hopes, we've talked about fears, we've talked about common ground and some hard dividing lines. What do you wish that we'd be talking more about?
I think we've covered a pretty good spectrum, honestly, some good questions. I think the most important part to me, as somebody who's on the losing side, is the next 4 years for people like us, and for, I think, Hannah earlier, who was LGBT, we are scared about the future. I mean, it's a real legitimate fear that we have about what this guy could be capable of. And I feel like, I don't want to put it on you, but as the winning side, it's like, you guys voted him into office, so it's up to you to stand against him if he's going to come down on those who can't defend themselves. And that, to me, is the most important thing, is like, I don't know, you just can't overlook something like that. That's why I could never support a man like Donald Trump.
And Nick, I saw you nodding at what Dean was saying there when he said, you guys put him into office, now you've got to have our back. And we saw that quite literally, physically, in the first panel, in which Hannah was talking about her fears as an LGBT American, and Cassie, a Trump voter, stood up and gave her a hug. It very much seemed like, I have your back. Now, what does that actually translate to?
I don't think we're going to let him do anything radical. I mean, like they said in the fear, and she brought up a really good point earlier, banning Muslims, I mean, that's not even realistic. It's not what our founding fathers would have wanted. It's not what America's based off of. I know a lot of coworkers that are immigrants, immigrant families, and I think that really touched something, because as a Republican and a military family, stuff like that, you know, I support the military, but with that, that's kind of supporting our nation too. And doing that, I was really blindsided by social media, by, you know, people posting certain things, and then they would just run with it. But until we kind of just push that aside and really talk to each other, it really brings another view in person, because you could post whatever you want online.
Matt, I want to hear from you. I know you're concerned about discrimination and about bias going forward. You voted for Secretary Clinton. Spell out for your new Republican friends here and for all of the Trump voters out there, what is your ask of them in the next 4 years?
I think it's just conversations like this. I think Facebook and Twitter and social media is so bombastic and so angry. I think conversations like we're having right now are important, and I'd like to have these conversations out in the public a whole lot more. This is the only way we're going to solve this problem. I think in a way I'm glad. I shouldn't say that. I think there was. It seemed logical to me that Trump might have won, because I think there's a segment of our population that seems to be doesn't seem to be heard, feel they're misunderstood, they're not represented. So in a way, it's showing a divide that has been there. It's just been brought to light, and I think we need to discuss those differences and discuss how we can move forward.
And you talk about people not being heard, and we talked about this in the first half hour, and it's worth noting again that when we asked you all to participate, we just asked you who you voted for, what your hopes and what your fears are, and we didn't screen people demographically. And as a result, our panel here skews close to the metro area, though we do have some folks who drove from northern Colorado and from out on the plains and so forth. But in addition, we have a lack of minority voices, people who have specific concerns about how they'll be treated under a Trump administration, as well as a good number of people who did not vote, and who are still Americans with rights and privileges and everything else, despite the fact that they did not vote. The only thing they might have given up is the opportunity to complain about it afterwards. As who was that? Rick who said that? You don't vote, can't complain. So I just feel like we need to acknowledge that not every voice is kind of at this table. Can I ask? I'll go to you just a quick sec. Show of hands. Who is surprised by the election result? You thought Trump was going to win?
I had a good feeling. I didn't was I sure? Because I saw the numbers. I pay attention to the numbers. I knew it was a long shot.
Which interesting, if I could just interject, that's also what the Trump team said. The Colorado Trump team, because I said, were your polls the same as our polls? And they said, oh yeah, we probably were going to lose. But there was a shot.
What I've noticed was there's a lot of Trump supporters that feel a lot of hate upon them if they mention that they're Trump supporters. So, and being conservative in nature, you don't really say, yes, I'm a big Trump supporter. I'm like, you don't see conservatives going out on rallies, going out on big protests. Does it happen? Yes. More likely than not, they're usually kind of more small, confined, and very pro-gun. It just doesn't happen as much because they're conservative in nature. That's part of the foundings of the Republican Party. But I would like to point out earlier that 8 years ago, for us really big conservatives, when Obama won election, his first term, a lot of Republicans thought the world was going to end. I remember South Park, where people were committing suicide, and they were making bomb shelters because they thought that he was going to spin our way and collapse the government. It didn't happen. Now, a lot of Trump's rhetoric, I found myself defending Trump a lot. Well, it's not really how he's saying it, it's what he's saying. And he's kind of an unapologetic nationalist. A lot of it, what he's doing, he's saying it on purpose to be anti-politically correct. That reached out to some of us. I wish he'd tone it down, and I wish he would stop it now, especially now that he's in office, because it's like, you could stop now. We get the point. The fact that he keeps going with it at times, especially after he won the Republican nominee, I was concerned. That's really was my biggest concern, that he was going to be so anti-politically correct, he was going to lose the election. But I kind of had my hopes, and I maybe, I just happened to be right. If I was wrong, I could have been easily looked a fool for thinking he was going to win. But it was really my faith that a lot of the people that were who was voting for him didn't speak up. I think they call it the unspoken majority.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting conversation to have, because you mentioned what were we talking about 8 years ago, and we certainly were not having next panels to discuss the outcome of the election and how scared people are and how hopeful people are. But I think we can acknowledge that this was a different type of election, that he is a different type of candidate, that he said some things that had never been said before. But you're right in pointing out how scared a lot of conservatives were 8 years ago that, you know, President Obama promised to be transformational, and you thought, oh crap, what's that transformation going to look like? I get that. Let me ask you, Michael, do you think that what we're doing is productive? I mean, I've heard people say, oh, you lost, crybabies, you know, go find your safe space, you know, protest in the streets, participation award, that kind of thing. Or do you get where Clinton voters are coming from when they say, like, they're legitimately scared?
Well, I mean, the two sides have differences, right? There are different policies that they support. So when your side loses, yeah, you're worried about how that's going to affect you, whether it could be taxes, whether it could be programs that you support. Are they going to get cut? So everybody has their beliefs that drive what they vote. So yeah, there's differences between the two parties, and so each one is concerned because something drove them to vote for who they were voting for, and now they see that they've lost that. But like you said before, you know, at the beginning when you threw, or close to the beginning when you threw your first comment in where you said, really not a lot is going to change. I mean,
that's my personal prediction.
But
because he promised big. He promised bigly.
It is true. I mean, it's three branches of government, right? I mean, he can't go in and legislate everything without it getting through Congress. Congress is there to check him. The Supreme Court's there to check all of them. You know, the biggest, my view, and what drove me to vote for him as opposed to Secretary Clinton was the fact that there are 3 seats potentially that could open up on the Supreme Court in these 4 years.
Did you consider voting for Clinton?
No.
You did not? Okay.
No.
Yeah, because of the court.
Because of the court, but also because of, quite frankly, some of the actions that she took that the time I spent working for the federal government, I knew that I would have been in jail for 15 years. I was flat told that. But to me, the driving factor is the court. The one place that a president can make long-term change or long-term effect is his appointments to the court. Anything can be undone. Anything a president can do in 4 and 8 years can be undone in 4 and 8 years. You'll see it now. You see it anytime the party changes. But that, when you appoint someone to the Supreme Court for life and they're on there for 30 years, that's where you, or at least in my hope, that they put strict constitutionalists on there who don't try to legislate from the bench, who try to rein in the power of the federal government, reserve more to the states.
And incidentally, that's probably the most mainstream conservative part of Trump's entire platform is the court. The names he's putting up are the same names that any Republican would probably put up. Lee, let me ask you this. As we talk back about this idea, because I feel like Craig made a really good point about what was the conversation we were having 8 years ago when a lot of conservatives were scared, and we were not having panels asking Obama voters if they would protect the Second Amendment rights of their Republican voting friends. What makes this different?
I think what makes it different is that he ran on a campaign of hate and division.
I didn't hear anybody here say that they voted for hate.
Right.
So either they're lying or they didn't.
Right.
What do you think?
I believe these people. Sitting here across from them, I believe them. And when we came in and met everyone, you do in your mind, you're like, oh, that person's Trump, that person's Clinton, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was wrong. I was surprised. So it is eye-opening.
And online, it's easier to be mean in your own house. It's easier to be extremely rude and throw anything that may even be false out there, but you think it sounds good. It makes you look worse as a person. But in person, I mean, I met 3 or 4 Democrats, and I didn't feel any different. I didn't look at them in a different way.
And 4 years ago, I do want to make this point. The Second Amendment rights, that's an amendment in the Constitution. When we're talking marriage equality and the registration of a religious group, yes, the separation of church and state is really important to our government, but it doesn't feel like it's being that separated when we're talking about registering a religious group.
Sure. There's a human rights conversation that is happening in this election that wasn't happening before, although I think you could make the argument that 8 years ago there were a lot of people who were pro-life who were concerned about how an Obama administration might change that issue, and that is a human rights issue for people who are pro-life. But no, I think it is important to acknowledge that every election is different, but this one is specifically different for a lot of people, but that's the reason why we want to have these conversations. Anybody here lost a friend over this? Jeremy.
I've had a lot of friends that were Clinton supporters, and they were Clinton supporters by default because, Bernie, and to speculation, the DNC and Hillary cheated Bernie out of what should have rightfully been his. So instead of turning their anger to the DNC or Hillary for brushing Bernie off, or being mad at the roughly 42 to 46% of Americans that didn't vote, they wanted to turn it on the third party. And it's not us. We want change. I mean, we want the same things that everyone else does, but we want smaller government. We want them out of our bedrooms. We want them to spend less money. And there's a very important thing that I don't think the mainstream media has talked about, which is what happened in Iceland in 2010. Something that feasibly could happen here. I mean, our government has bankrupted us. I mean, we have lost lots of money. Wall Street tycoons, they overthrew their government and they put those responsible in prison. And that's something that could happen in America, but people need to understand, and I think that's been missed a lot, and a lot of people don't realize that happened in Iceland. The criminals that did what they did are now in prison, and Iceland's, recovering and rebuilding after taking their country back.
Yeah, they had transformational change. In our closing few minutes, I want to talk about the value of these conversations and why you felt strongly enough to come and participate. Arlene, let me ask you, if we're being very honest here, more Trump supporters who initially said, I want to come and talk, backed out than Clinton supporters and said, I still support Mr. Trump, I just don't know that I want to be on TV doing that. So you have that idea of, the quiet Trump voter that you talked about, Craig, that might still exist. Why did you feel strongly enough about the value of these conversations to come and have it?
I think I'm just such a big believer in this country. I just really think that he can make a difference, even though I heard all of his talks on immigration and whatever, and I'm sitting there going, okay, everything he says, I should be totally going the other way. And yet, I just really felt like I wanted to be part of this. And it's good to hear the way everybody else thinks, but I agree. These talks are amazing.
Matt, let me ask you, why did you feel the need to come out here and have this conversation today? What about it was valuable?
Well, basically what I said before is I think the only way that we bridge our divide is if we talk to each other, not yell at each other on Facebook, just to really talk to each other and hash each other the differences that we have. I've listened to both panels, and no one here has said anything that seems unreasonable or even something that I wouldn't support. I think that's just the only way forward. I'm also just very disillusioned with some people, with some of the rhetoric on Facebook. I have conservative friends and I have liberal friends on Facebook, and I'm just alarmed at just the amount of anger and frustration and hatred that is portrayed on Facebook. And I'm not immune from that. I mean, sometimes I can rant and rave on Facebook with the best of them. But I think this is the way to bridge the divide.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate all of you being willing to come down and have this conversation, and to all of the voters who were in our initial panel earlier on. I feel like we've had a productive conversation. As we said at the onset, the goal isn't to convince anybody else. The goal is just to have a conversation, and maybe if that's the starting point of more conversations, we can do that. And again, I'm looking at you people at home. If complete strangers can do this, you can call your uncle. Okay? Go to Thanksgiving, okay? All right, you can do this. You can have these conversations. You've seen how it's worked here, and it starts by understanding that there are well-meaning people on the other side and that it's not always a caricature. And if you will also note, every single person involved here has done a whole lot more listening than they have talking. And that's probably pretty valuable too. We appreciate everybody who has joined us for this special hour-long edition of Next. Let's Just Talk. We will look for opportunities to continue this conversation across Colorado in the coming weeks and months. Have a good night.